The Terminator franchise is a weird series to watch because it's so hit or miss. I love the first two movies and enjoy some aspects of the third. I like some of Salvation, Genisys was the definition of meh, and surprisingly I really enjoyed Dark Fate. Honestly, I hadn't seen Genisys or Dark Fate before starting this video, and the latter is kinda a great reboot in a way the former is not. But we're not talking about Dark Fate. We're here for the bafflingly spelled Genisys. Oh, also, I like the Sarah Connor Chronicles too, if you were wondering. Anyway, what can I say about Genisys except why?
Why, Lisa? Why?
Nobody was asking for a reboot, but what is franchise may never die, so I suppose this movie was as inevitable as Judgment Day. But what isn't inevitable is this movie's failure. After all, Genisys had a fine cast, fine budget, and moderate potential. The script just wasn't there. Plus the trailer spoiled the big twist.
Yikes!
Here's what we're gonna do, friends. We're gonna go back in time and submit our own script for this movie. And it's gonna be better. Now, usually I stick with the same cast and budget and whatnot, but since this is the beginning of a new franchise, I'm gonna give myself a little leeway and allow major changes. Let's keep the budget the same, but we're gonna do a few things that will help this reboot stand on its own and springboard into a new franchise. So if you notice some major actors missing from my script, just know that it's all part of the plan. With all that said, let's get started. Oh, and let's rename this thing, because Genisys is big doo-doo. Realm Spinner, don't cut me off this time, because I have to do some setup. We open with a portal. Kyle Reese materializes in an empty alleyway, butt naked. He steals a homeless guy's clothes because he's a jerk. Then, just like in the OG movie, the cops chase him, but instead of a clothing store, he runs into a hardware store. Let's say one that has those hanging light bulb arrangements, so we can give the scene a little, how you say, je ne sais quoi. Instead of hiding, Kyle attacks the cops, and here we diverge between versions. Whereas OG Kyle was tame apart from flashes of anger, this Kyle is kind of like a wild animal that keeps it together when he can. He and the cops scuffle, with the latter able to subdue Kyle, but they're interrupted when a man in a trench coat enters the store. The cops threaten him, but the mysterious man pulls a gun and shoots at them. Kyle runs for cover. The cops return fire, shattering bulbs as bullets crisscross the room. But the mysterious man doesn't just tank shots, as most Terminators would. Instead, he dodges them. Then he sprints at the cops and uses hand-to-hand to subdue and shoot them point blank. As this mysterious villain takes a moment to reload, Kyle runs for the exit, only to see a car coming. So he dives for safety as the car blasts through the entrance, while the mystery man climbs a stand not to get run over. It's your girl, Sarah Connor. She rescues Kyle, driving off with him. And here we get another change. No Arnold. On the drive, Sarah explains her backstory to Kyle. A mysterious woman appeared to Sarah when she was younger and rescued her from a Terminator that murked her parents. When Sarah asks if Kyle knew the woman, referring to her as Rook, Kyle says he has no idea. Sarah goes on to describe how Rook warned her of future events, training her for the day when a new threat would appear. And she mentions with bitterness that at some point Rook disappeared, never to be seen again. The two reach Sarah's hideout, which is a warehouse on the outskirts of town. Sarah lets Kyle in on the plan. They're gonna lure this new Terminator to them, then use a series of traps to kill it. Easy peasy. Shortly afterwards, said Terminator arrives at the warehouse.
Hello there.
But instead of attacking, it stops, then calls out to our heroes in hiding, offering them a truce and requesting to talk instead of fight.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
The Terminator dodges through traps and bullets, avoiding tripwires, false floors, and all sorts of wacky shenanigans as it races towards our heroes. It reaches Kyle, engaging in hand-to-hand combat as Sarah runs away. Somehow Kyle is better, but the Terminator is faster, overwhelming its opponent. But when it locks Kyle down, it doesn't kill him. Instead, it tells him something we don't hear just as Sarah reaches her sniper's nest. She shoots, but the Terminator reacts, catching the bullet between two fingers. As Sarah reloads, the Terminator stands, then staggers, looking dazed. Sarah's about to fire again when suddenly lights illuminate the area, while helicopters arrive on the scene. Then the police burst into the warehouse, arresting all three combatants. Kyle and Sarah are put in the back of the same cruiser, their opponent in another. Sarah asks what the Terminator's deal is, so Kyle explains. The thing after them is called a Hunter 9, or H9 for short. It's a machine designed to rapidly process its environment and react to it at a rate inhumanly possible. However, H9s in the future weren't ever Terminators. This is because their rapid processing caused overheating that would melt their fleshy parts, which defeated the purpose of having them. When Sarah asks if Skynet somehow solved the issue, Kyle does the most helpful thing he can and shrugs.
I don't know!
Cut to the H9 in another police cruiser. We see that it is actually asleep, but quickly awakens. It tries its wrist cuffs, but is not strong enough to break them.
I can break these cuffs!
You can't break those cuffs.
So it uses its double-jointed hands instead to slip free of the cuffs.
Success!
Cut back to Sarah and Kyle. Sarah asks Kyle what the H9 told him, but he brushes her off. Kyle then tries to convince the cops driving them to let them go, to no avail. Back to the H9. It gets one of its two drivers' attention by palming the divider. Then when the driver turns to look, a needle springs from the H9's palm, injecting the driver in the neck and causing the car to swerve. Back to Kyle, who has begun shouting at the cops and banging on the car's divider. The cruiser pulls over. The cops get out, opening the door, and Kyle attacks them. Back to the H9. The driver gets the car under control. The passenger asks what's up. In response, the driving cop unholsters his gun, then shoots his partner in the face before putting the pedal to the metal. Kyle is subdued by the cops. Sarah notices another cruiser approaching, then leaps from her own just as it's T-boned. Kyle is already running. Sarah runs after Kyle with one officer giving chase, while the remaining ones yank the H9 and driver from the wreckage. Sarah and Kyle race down an alley before breaking into an abandoned department store. They knock out the cop chasing them, then Sarah steals his gun. Kyle advises that they shoot the guy, but Sarah forces him to follow her and run away instead. Meanwhile, the infected driver recovers and shoots the cops that saved him, then unlocks the H9's remaining cuff. The driver then shoots himself, while the H9 heads after our plucky heroes. Said plucky heroes are hunkered down in an empty apartment inside an abandoned complex, recovering from their wounds and lockpicking their cuffs. While they do so, Sarah looks out the window, then does a double take. She directs Kyle to look, and we see a billboard for Hourglass Inc., a company that is reportedly working on time travel technology. And we see the premier scientist of the company is Dr. Theodore Clive, who looks like an older version of the H9. Sarah wonders why her mentor Rook never warned her about Clive, or what this even means. While contemplating how this is possible, she also recalls that she saw the infected cop, and asks how the H9 infected him. But Kyle claims not to know.
I don't know!
When Sarah asks again what the H9 told him, Kyle again brushes her off. But she insists, so Kyle finally says,
It told me I'd die tonight, but that it can save me.
This raises Sarah's alarm bells. So, remembering how Rook abandoned her, she runs from Kyle. He pursues her, but neither of them get far, because the H9 has arrived. It chases them up the apartment stairwell, all the way to the roof. Kyle and Sarah flee to the edge, but they're cornered. So the H9 approaches them, while Sarah demands to know what it wants or what it even is. The H9 stops them to talk, and it reveals that it's not a true Terminator, or even a Hunter 9. It's not built to look like Theodore Clive. It is Theodore Clive.
What?
But not from the present. This version returned from the future. In the original timeline, Clive was building the time machine, but Judgment Day happened, resulting in the death of his wife and son. Clive survived, spending years finishing his work separately from Cybernet's own time machine, while simultaneously incorporating machinery into his own body. By harvesting human and machine parts, he built himself a new form, shedding his older one apart from his vital organs. Then he traveled back in time. But not to cancel the apocalypse, which he claims is inescapable. Instead, Clive wants to make Judgment Day irrelevant. His goal is to create a singularity event that will merge machines and humans, so that when the end does inevitably come, Skynet won't destroy the world, because it won't be able to destroy itself. Its rogue AI will likely still take control, but no one will have to die, especially not his family.
Skynet took everything from us,
He tells Sarah and Kyle.
but it doesn't have to. I can fix everything.
Then a second needle emerges from the cyborg's wrist. He wants to infect Sarah with the nanovirus he's developed. She'll in turn pass the infection onto her child. Clive will research the effects while creating a methodology for mass infection worldwide, so that by the time the end of the world happens, it'll be a new beginning instead. Clive then offers a hand and a new way forward.
Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
The three engage in a final rooftop battle. Clive is fast enough to fight Sarah and Kyle simultaneously, beginning to beat them both. He laments that he can't just kill the two for fear of scrambling the timeline, but swears to control them via infection so they can't interfere with his plans. In response, Kyle and Sarah redouble their efforts. The fight spills from one rooftop to another. Our two heroes work to wear Clive down, causing his reactions to slow as his processor starts to overheat. At one point, Kyle's arm is broken and he's flung aside. Sarah makes a last stand, calling for Kyle's help, but her companion is nowhere to be found. She almost shoots Clive point blank, but he dodges, leaping into hiding. Sarah runs for the stairs, but Clive ambushes her, getting her down and springing his syringe. Then he lunges and stabs Kyle, who has jumped in the way. A shocked Clive shouts in dismay. Kyle hugs Clive with his remaining good arm, dragging them both to the floor. Then Sarah rolls onto Clive, putting her gun to his temple.
Fix this.
The epilogue is brief. Sarah is on the road, stopping for gas. We see Kyle with her, his arm in a sling. Neither know the effects of the infection, although they plan to figure it out. Nor can they kidnap or kill current-day Theodore, because without him there's no time machine. And without a time machine, there's no John Connor, since Kyle is his daddy. So our heroes carry on, aiming to figure it all out. And the movie fades to black, heralding an uncertain future. Well, that's the end of that. Or should I say the beginning? Let's have a quick post-movie chit-chat. First, did you know J.K. Simmons was in the original Genisys? Yeah, he's pretty tangential to the story, so I cut him. We don't need such a big actor for such a nothing role, especially since we're operating on a budget. Second, Kyle. You'll notice my version is much less heroic, much rougher around the edges. I think both versions of Kyle adapt a little too quickly to the past. It'd be cool if this version was almost like a caveman that is just overwhelmed by our world's sensory overload. He doesn't have manners or honor. In fights, he bites and scratches. He's still a soldier, but he also grew up in the wasteland and should act accordingly. Third, no Arnie, apart from the cameo where Rook saves Sarah from him. He's done his part for this franchise. Yes, he's iconic, but we need to move on. It's time to hang up the OG Terminator and wade into something new. And that something is Clive. What I want for this series is for different aspects of the world to be explored. Prior installments have touched upon amalgamations of man and machine, so with this script I brought those threads to their logical conclusion. The series needs an expansion of what their antagonists can be, because all Terminators, regardless of their model, tend to be tanks who use brute force. Clive is different in that he cannot use raw strength because so much of him is human. In fact, I'd prefer if the actor cast for Clive was very lean and very acrobatic. That way he directly contrasts against Arnold and the others who, while not as big, are straightforward in their modus operandi. Plus, Clive is unique in that he doesn't want to, nor can he, kill his targets. That fundamentally engenders a different experience than what we've seen in the past. As for the future, this script leaves enough on the table to garner interest and write fresh stories. We don't know who Rook is or where she went. We don't know what's going to happen to Kyle or if he and Sarah can even poop out John anymore. There's a lot of avenues left to go down, which is kind of my biggest letdown with the OG movie. Genisys is a film that had some interesting concepts, but failed to explore them in an engaging way. It was also hobbled by being PG-13, but you could say that's debatable.
Yoink!
Either way, my version is cheaper due to cutting those huge CGI set pieces and some unnecessary actors, and more engaging by a smaller scale with more focused personal scenes. And with a little luck and love, it could be the beginning of an all-new, all-different timeline. That's all for this one. Like and subscribe, because I've got more rewrites, fixes, and essays in the works. And speaking of, for my next rewrite, well, we're putting a pause on rewrites and doing something a little different for October. So, until then, cheers.